You know the name. It's basically a synonym for conquest. His ambition? It was like a fire that literally reshaped the ancient world. For more than 2,000 years, the legend of Alexander the Great has just echoed through history. It's the story of a man who became a myth and an empire built in a single, absolutely breathtaking lifetime.
But really, stop and think about that. How did he do it? How does a prince from the rugged mountains of Macedon rise up and topple the greatest empire on earth? How does one man, in just over a decade, conquer pretty much everything? Well, to find the answer, we have to go right back to the beginning.
To really understand the conqueror, you first have to meet the boy. Because you see, Alexander wasn't just born into royalty, he was forged. Forged in this crucible of myth, radical new philosophy, and the seriously brutal politics of the Macedonian court.
And his rise, it was absolutely meteoric. I mean, look at this. Born a prince, and by 13, he's being taught by the greatest mind in Greece. By 18, he's already on the battlefield, commanding cavalry and shattering enemy lines. And then, at just 20 years old, after his own father is assassinated, the throne and the fate of an empire is his. And his tutor, get this, was none other than Aristotle, the Aristotle, who gave him a lot more than just lessons in logic. He gave him Homer's Iliad. For Alexander, this wasn't just some story, it was his blueprint, his destiny. He saw himself as the next Achilles, fated for immortal glory, and he literally carried a copy with him on every single campaign.
But don't think for a second this was a sure thing. His relationship with his father, King Philip, was a total powder keg. Picture this, at a royal banquet, one of Philip's generals toasts to a legitimate heir, which was a direct shot at Alexander. Well, Alexander just loses it. He hurls a cup and screams, "You villain! What, am I then a bastard?" The court itself was a battlefield, and he had to win there first.
And then, it happens. An assassin's knife strikes his father down. In all that chaos, Alexander doesn't really grieve. Nope, he acts. With chilling speed, he executes every single rival with a claim to the throne, including his own cousin. The message was, let's just say written in blood. The crown is mine, don't even think about it.
So, with his home base secure, he turns his attention to the rest of Greece. And when the city of Thebes dared to rebel, his response was absolute. He burned the city to the ground, sold 30,000 people into slavery, and left nothing but ruins. A shockwave of pure fear just ripped across the Greek world. The message couldn't have been clearer. Do not defy Alexander.
With all of Greece now kneeling at his feet, he turns his gaze east, to the colossal, ancient, and unbelievably wealthy Persian Empire. This was his father's unfinished war. For Alexander, it was about to become his obsession.
So in 334 BCE, he crosses into Asia. He's just 22 years old, leading this relatively small army against a superpower that stretched from Egypt all the way to India. To pretty much everyone else, this looked like a suicide mission. But to Alexander, this was destiny calling.
And at the Battle of Issus, wow, this is where it all goes down. He's hugely outnumbered, but he does something that is just unthinkable. He doesn't command from the back. No, he leads the charge himself, like a spear point aimed right at the heart of the Persian army, at King Darius III. And faced with this absolute fury, Darius breaks. He literally turns his chariot around and flees, abandoning his army, his empire, even his own family.
And the thing is, he was just undefeated. From his very first battle in Asia, at Granicus, to the final blow against Darius at Gaugamela, all the way to the jungles of India, Alexander never lost a single major battle. It's a perfect record of conquest that kind of defies belief, and it cemented his name among the gods of war.
You know, as Alexander's empire got bigger and bigger, so did his ambition. Being a king just wasn't cutting it for him anymore. He started to believe he was something more.
When he got to Egypt, they didn't see him as a conqueror. They saw him as a liberator from Persian rule. They actually crowned him pharaoh. He founded a city and named it after himself, Alexandria. But even a pharaoh's crown wasn't enough. He made this perilous journey deep into the desert, looking for an answer to a question that was just burning inside him.
He goes to the remote oracle of Siwa. Now, we don't really know what happened inside that sanctuary. It's all shrouded in mystery. But when he came out, the priest there had greeted him as the son of the god Zeus Ammon. Now, whether this was political theater or an actual revelation, it didn't really matter. The idea took root. Alexander, the mortal king, began to see himself as Alexander, the god.
This whole "I'm a god" thing, it put him on a collision course with his Greek past. I mean, his own teacher, Aristotle, had taught him that all non-Greeks were basically barbarians. But Alexander was now the ruler of this massive, multicultural empire, and he saw things differently. He started wearing Persian clothes, adopting their customs, even marrying a Persian princess. He wasn't just conquering the world anymore. He was trying to merge it.
So you'd think conquering Persia would be enough, right? Nope, not for Alexander. He was driven by this desire to reach the ends of the world. So he pushes his army east further than any Greek had ever gone before, into the unknown lands of India.
So in 326 BCE, on the banks of the Hydaspes River, he meets maybe his most terrifying opponent yet, the Indian king Porus and his army of war elephants. I mean, think about it. These are living, breathing siege towers that just trample men and horses. The battle was a tactical masterpiece, and Alexander won. But man, it was a bloody, brutal victory that came at a huge cost.
And he wanted to keep going. Of course he did. He wanted to conquer all of India, to reach the great ocean at the end of the world. But his men? These soldiers had followed him for a decade, across deserts and mountains. They were done. They refused. They laid down their weapons. For the very first time, Alexander's will was broken, not by an enemy, but by his own exhausted soldiers. The God King was forced to turn back.
Alexander returned to Babylon, the new capital of his massive empire. But the man who had survived countless battles, who had conquered the known world, was about to meet an enemy he just couldn't defeat.
His end didn't come on the battlefield. It came in a fever bed. After a long night of partying in Babylon, he gets struck by this mysterious illness. A raging fever, crippling pain. Within days, the man whose voice commanded millions couldn't even speak. After 11 agonizing days, the conqueror of the world was dead. He was only 32 years old.
And here's the thing. To this day, we still don't know for sure what killed him. Was he poisoned by a rival? Did he pick up a deadly fever, like malaria or typhoid? Or was it some rare neurological thing? His death remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries.
So he conquered the world, but he never named a successor. The story goes that on his deathbed, when they asked him who he left his empire to, he whispered, "To the strongest." Well, that was basically a death warrant. His own generals, the guys who fought beside him, immediately turned on each other, tearing his huge empire apart in decades of brutal civil war.
So the physical empire he built, yeah, it shattered almost overnight. But his true legacy, that was something else, something much more enduring. His armies had carried more than just spears. They carried ideas, Greek language, art, philosophy. It all spread from Egypt to India, mixing with local cultures to create this vibrant new civilization we call the Hellenistic world. And that cultural empire would outlast Rome.
Which leaves us with the big, eternal question, doesn't it? Was he a visionary who wanted to unite East and West? Or was he a ruthless tyrant, a megalomaniac whose ambition was paid for with millions of lives? Visionary, destroyer, hero, monster. Maybe he was all of them. And that, I think, is why more than 2,000 years later, the world is still haunted by the ghost of Alexander the Great.